still trust the Chancellor has said he'll keep it under review. So I think it's going to recognize that there are people who really are going to find it very, very hard. And I hope we'll come to the aid of those people, like the furlough scheme which he created. So I think
so he'll come back before you think. I can remember when he first announced an increase in the living wage, you had a single one-word tweet in response. You said, yippee. And that increase comes in, I think, tomorrow. But also,
In a quarter of a mile, keep left to continue on Fags Road.
And I wonder in particular what you think about people on benefits, because if you're getting the living wage, you're getting wage money's coming in, but if you're living on benefits around, your benefits are pegged at 3%, inflation's running at 8%, maybe even more than that, and you're going to find life very, very hard. Do you think as a society we have not done
Keep left to continue on Fags Road.
I mean, I did lead a debate on the living wage in May last year, and 50 members of the House of Lords all were positive, and I'm glad that the Chancellor has brought in the proper living wage. But the issue that you are raising about people on benefits...
In a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Great Southwest Road, A30.
A civilized society, but the way it treats those who are on the margins of society, and we have not really. So there's a lot still to be done.
So, very, very famous Archbishop quote there. By that standard, we are not a civilized society. Well, this was not a civilized statement, as it should have been. Can I ask a little bit about what you're noticing in the church and amongst your parishioners and people that you're dealing with in terms of how badly people are struggling at the moment? It's a big, big increase in food banks over the last few years. What's the situation as you observe it on the ground now?
I think on the ground, we thought that the food banks would be temporary. But eventually they become a permanent fixture in the whole of the United Kingdom. And the worry is that people in work, or some people are getting benefits, but that is not capable of sustaining. And a country really, as rich as the United Kingdom, should be concentrating on the poor more. So this leveling up has got to say to ourselves, people who really...
Take the second left onto Great Southwest Road, A30.
And is growing, and something has got to be done. And it seems to me, people on benefits, I would like to encourage the Chancellor to revisit that whole question. And I know inflation is...
Continue on Great Southwest Road for 3/4 of a mile.
more expensive, but at the moment it isn't. And he was very right when he took the decision on the furlough scheme, because at that time the interest rate was nothing. And you've got to remember that children who are going to bed hungry because they come from a family where no matter what they do, they can't actually have enough money to feed on. And the food banks are supplementing, but it's still not enough. Something has got to be done.
It's not Christian to leave those people in a situation in which they are.
No, it isn't. It isn't.
I'm very conscious that you've looked across the board at these issues, and it is difficult, of course, for any government. But would you like, in specific terms, I think what Ian Duncan Smith said to me yesterday, he said, actually putting more money into universal credit.
In a quarter of a mile, take the exit towards Heathrow Airport.
It's a very good way of growing economy. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, you visit, we could have now even better, you go around and you look at the people really who've been left behind for a very long time, wagging their socks off to make sure that...
Take the exit towards Heathrow Airport.
But the income that they get is not capable, given the costs that are rising, to feed their family. And I would have
In a quarter of a mile, keep left at the fork to continue towards Southern Perimeter Road.
There's such a lot going on at the moment. Earlier today, the government U-turned on its position on banning gay conversion therapy. What's your view about that?
I voted for it in the terms that conversion therapy, as a Christian, I believe that our conversion is by the Holy Spirit, the love of God, to tell another person that we can actually...
Keep left at the fork.
your sexual orientation. I said that doesn't seem to be right for me.
Again, doesn't seem Christian.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, what are you converting them to? And nobody tells you, other than they will cease being gay. And I said to myself, we've done terrible things. Turing, who was the man who broke the enigma, actually...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
It's awful, and that's why the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Michael Ramsey, in the House regardless of laws. He said it was the languages at the time. He believed that sexual activity of a gay kind was sinful, but he was absolutely convinced it is not a crime. Today we approach the word sin slightly differently. And he would have said this probably falls short of the glory of God, like in many of our lives, but this does not mean it's a crime. A report was put out, the Wolfson report, and within 9 months there was no more criminalization, no people were presenting wives. So
In the end, not kind.
no.
You, for obvious reasons, have always been interested in the plight of refugees. Your reflections on the fact we've got a country very, very keen to welcome in many Ukrainian refugees, but there does seem to be a big bureaucratic blockage.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road. Continue on Southern Perimeter Road for 1.5 miles.
Some very good confidential conversations that there is definitely a threat by the Russians for people to come here as refugees, but actually not to do the kind of mess that we saw before with their Novichok poison. So there is Russian agents, definitely a security risk, but that does not, for me, mean that people who've got relations here, who can prove that they've got a relation, they should treat them slightly differently instead of, this blanket application. But we through all of this, and I think the government was caught out. They were not ready, like they were never ready for COVID, and they're just playing catch up. So I recognize the security question, but they've been caught out, and I just hope this will be sorted out pretty quickly, and that's why on Sunday I'm having a vigil prayer outside 2 o'clock outside the Ukrainian embassy, and we're very glad that we got Bishop Noah Koshki from the Ukrainian Catholics and Archbishop Nikita Greek Orthodox Church, and many others coming to pray. And our hope is to, that thing in the Lord's Prayer, deliver us from evil. Ukraine needs to be delivered from evil.
All the church is shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you about one other thing that I know is close to your heart, which is the Commonwealth. You've spoken about the Queen's leadership of the Commonwealth. And we've also had Prince William hinting that he might not be the ruler of the Commonwealth in the old-fashioned way when his term comes. What do you think is going to be the future of the Commonwealth? Is he going to be carrying on something which is, as it were, led by the British royal family, or might it develop in a different way?
In the arrangements, the Queen is as the head of the Commonwealth, but she sees that headship in terms of service. She actually turns it on its head, and William has got to fully understand that when the thing says head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, always that turn them on their head. To me, it's about service.
And talking of the Queen and service, we saw her this week at the Duke of Edinburgh's memorial service in Westminster Abbey, and it was said by some people, she's an old lady now, said by some people, we're not going to see...
In 1/4 mile, at Western Perimeter Road roundabout, take the first exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
I was preaching on the service, and the service in the Queen was supposed to be there, but there was a worry that the journey from Windsor to the Abbey and back was going to be too long. That's why, but she didn't come. At least she took energy and effort to be at the memorial service. Yeah, I think probably we will not see her very often, but remember she said, how long her life is going to be.
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road. In 200 yards, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Stanwell Moor Road, A3044.
Well, Cynthia, it's been lovely having you in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to me. After the break, we're going to be hearing from a former highly experienced British Army General and Defence Advisor Sir Simon Mayle. The time is now 6:33 and Amelia Cox has your news.
A number of energy websites have crashed as people rush to submit meter readings ahead of the price cap going up tomorrow. Customers have been advised to check to make sure they don't get overcharged. Vladimir Putin says Russia will cut gas supplies to countries who don't pay in rubles from tomorrow. The Russian president's demand is being seen as an attempt to boost the country's currency, which has been hit by Western sanctions. And a Metropolitan Police officer will appear in court next month.
Exit the roundabout onto Stanwell Moor Road.
Jordan Walker-Brown was left paralysed after falling from a wall in May 2020. LBC weather, cold tonight with wintry showers for some eastern areas and the far northwest, a low of
quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the 4th exit onto the M25 slip road to M4, M40.
Like this. The ultimate drama. eFacts. It's secure, easy. Head to eFacts.co.uk/call.
This year at Sky Sports Golf is every men's and women's major live. And with 23 different winners for the last 25 majors, which way will it go? Witness the unpredictable season exclusively live on Sky Sports Golf for £18 extra a month. It's heading for the hole. Search Get Sky Sports Golf. See Sky.com for details. Sky key required. Further terms apply.
This is LBC Tonight with Andrew Marr. Good evening, this is Andrew Marr.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
Political correspondent at the Daily Telegraph, and she's in Lviv, in Ukraine, from where she joins me now. Welcome, Danielle. I hope you can hear me clearly. Hello. I know you've been meeting quite a lot of the very, very young
Continue for half a mile.
Ukraine. I don't know whether we call them kids or millennials or whatever, but they're people who are of the age they ought to be playing Candy Crush all day, and instead they're lining up and learning how to fire AK-47s. Just tell me a little bit about the people who are now going to be on the front line if it comes in your direction.
I think that's a really good way to summarise it. You know, they're children, they should be at home playing, I don't know, video games or studying for their exams or whatever, and instead they are learning how to handle these heavy weapons and learning, you know, self-defence and first aid, but not even just, you know, your regular first aid. It's quite severe stuff, such as how to use a tourniquet, the limb.
In 300 yards, merge onto M25.
It's intense things that these people are suddenly learning about, and something that I presume about a month ago they never thought would be part of their daily life. What I found really inspiring about today was I went down to a centre that had originally been open for young men, because the thinking was that it's going to be men that would
Continue on M25 for 1 mile.
they were women that were really interested in coming along and learning not just the self-defence and the first aid, but also how to fire these weapons. A young woman I spoke to said, you know, she could be sitting at home doing something safe, but she wanted to get out and protect her country, and I told her how brave she was, and so much more brave than I think I would ever be in that situation.
It's very, very moving, this. It also makes me reflect. Vladimir Putin keeps going on about the decadence of the West and gender identity West, and they're all snowflakes and they're all decadent. And by implication, the Russians have got a really good, macho, old-fashioned army. We'll show you what's what. And yet these flaky millennials have been taking on the Russians and beating them.
I know, it's remarkable. I think we've really given millennials a hard time, to be honest, over the years, and it just goes to show that they are absolutely not snowflakes, and you know what, they may be for
Snowflakes, anyway.
pardon?
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 15, use the left lane to take the M4 exit to Reading, Slough.
I don't know, never mind, honestly, and I'm so impressed every time I go out and I meet such a young Ukrainian on the street. I'm just in awe of them.
Danielle, nonetheless.
Use the left lane to exit at junction 15, then keep left at the fork.
Yeah, and he was saying the mood is really changing there. Do you sense also a sort of ripple on
Keep left at the fork.
the war is actually altering, and that Ukraine is beginning to take back territory and could, deep breath, remarkable, actually win this thing?
I interviewed the mayor of Lviv today, and he is quite an outspoken man. He was the one that when there was an attack on a fuel depot centre last Saturday when Biden was in Poland, said that that had been a deliberate decision by Putin to say hello to Biden.
Sir Simon, welcome. Hope you can hear me. You have led British forces in many theatres, Kosovo and the Gulf, Afghanistan and so on. First of all, your professional take on how the Russians have been behaving in Ukraine from a military point of view.
Well, clearly, Andrew, and thanks for the opportunity to be on your show. I think we should be absolutely inspired by what the Ukrainians have achieved. I think listening to your previous commentator, Putin made a set of complete false assumptions.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Forces the character of the Ukrainian president, and he went in with what has proved to be a very, very flawed plan and a very flawed instrument, the Russian army, which we had largely built up.
So, the defense here.
Keep right to stay on M4.
When we say the Ukrainians will win, I am very encouraged by what they're doing. I'm very encouraged by what the
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
minimalist objectives will remain control of the east, the south, and the corridor to Crimea. And it's still very achievable for him if he can easily reach and win the battle around Mariupol.
I may be a natural scaredy cat, but I slightly worry when I hear somebody like the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace saying that Putin is in a cage of his own making. He's in a cage. Because I think, yes, he is in a cage, but he's also got nuclear weapons. He can cause huge devastation, and caged creatures can be extremely dangerous still. So, what do you think about the dangers of escalation?
I really worry about the dangers of escalation. It's always worth an old prior I used to have when I was in Baghdad was, if you want to understand this problem, you need to get a bigger map. And it is remarkable if you look at the overall size of Russia and the scale of the Russian resources, including military. They have been tactically inept, logistically unbalanced, far too many of us say false assumptions. But Russia is a country that has a deep sense of national pride, will be very concerned about this national humiliation, both nationally and individually in Putin's case. And so we want to be very, very clear-sighted about how this could continue to go, while absolutely applauding and being so thankful for the resilience of the Ukrainian resistance.
Sir Simon, one of the things that was talked about a lot at the beginning of the conflict that hasn't really happened is cyber war, cyber attacks. And I think I remember people saying, are we going to suddenly find that we can't get access to our bank accounts? Are those mobile phones and the little computers we carry about with us, are they going to stop working? Are we going to have cyber attacks on electricity supplies, water supplies and all the rest of it? None of that has so far happened. How concerned are you that that might be the next front, if I can use that old-fashioned word?
Yeah, I remain concerned, Andrew. I think both from a Western NATO perspective and I suspect Putin-Russian perspective, there's a great desire not to expand this conflict. I'm slightly surprised, I have to say, how inept, again, the Russians have been using cyber warfare against the Ukrainians. But equally, it's an instant wake-up call that cyber isn't everything. And what we're seeing ultimately is very brave young men and women.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
And taken on the physical might of Russia. So at the moment, although I suspect there is a lot that Russia could do, I think Putin is very aware of his own vulnerability. Our defensive capabilities, but also our offensive, were he to try and widen the conflict into Western Europe or into America.
Well, this is something
there, but it's been held in reserve.
This is something that nobody talks about, of course, but we obviously have cyber capabilities too. And in some sort of cyber war, if that broke out, I guess one of the big problems is the lack of old-fashioned red lines. Where are they?
Indeed, and you'll be well aware, we've had a lot of what we might call cyber warfare or cyber terrorism. It's very difficult to work out, A, who's responsible, who is actually conducting it, and what constitutes a red line that turns it from espionage into warfare.
Simon Mail, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mail there. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to the former Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Michael Heseltine. The time is 6:44 and 40 seconds.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Tomorrow, energy bills will increase by 54%. Have you worked out how this is going to affect your household budget?
Ian Dale on LBC.
This is the new way to sell your car from home. This is the Motorway. Motorway's trusted dealers compete to give you the best.
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Price. You can sit back and relax. We'll pick your car up from home for free. It really is that simple. Get your quote and get started at motorway.co.uk. This is the way. This is the Motorway.
Exit at junction 6.
Is your bank doing more to support your business, while also standing up for the things that matter most to you? If the answer is no, maybe it's time to switch to a more...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Tons Lane, A355.
And we also offer 30 months free everyday business banking on our business current account. How does your bank do business? Sole traders and single directors only. Apply online. Charges for cash and cheque transactions. Visit our website for details. Subject to status, eligibility and T's and C's.
Free Now is the mobility super app. That means more ways to get around London. So when you're in a rush and you're cutting it fine for the flight, all you do is tap and go and enjoy your ride. Get a low price ride quickly with black cabs and private hire cars. Or dodge the traffic with e-scooters and e-bikes. Free Now, get there your way. Get the app for £12 off your first ride using code radio. Offer available on your first Free Now ride until the 30th of April. Geographic exclusions apply. 18 plus, driving licence required.
I'm security, and this is my fellow.
I'm his boy, Ease.
And together, we're eFax. While I keep faxes more secure than a Typewad's wallet, locked inside a safe.
That makes sending all that important info super easy. Like, so easy.
Exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
Hold it with your hands tied. Anywhere, anytime. Like, in a click.
The ultimate combo.
eFax.
In a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
.uk/corporate.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC tonight with Andrew Marr.
And on cue, this is Andrew Marr in the LBC studio, and with me is LBC's Westminster editor, Ben Kentish. Ben, I started off the show by talking about the imminence of the local elections, and of course they are local elections, not national elections in a normal sense, but they're very important, aren't they, this year?
They're hugely important, not least of all, Andrew, because they give us a real sense, the first since the Partygate story broke, of course, of just how the British...
Slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
8,000 seats or so across 200 authorities, up for grabs across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Labour hoping to make inroads in some of the areas, of course, where they lost ground at the general election and indeed more recent local elections.
So back up in those red wall seats.
Dudley, Walsall, Sunderland.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
But they also need to try to show, of course, that they are gaining support in Scotland from the SNP, and crucially in London. That's really one to keep an eye on. Lots of Tory concerns about losing councils like Barnet. They've held that since 2002. Wandsworth, they've held that.
It's very interesting hearing Nadeem Zahawi talking specific terms about Wandsworth and Westminster and council taxes and Merton and so forth. Yeah. That's clearly what they're thinking about a lot.
It's a worry. Kensington and Chelsea, the Conservatives have always held that council for more than 50 years, and yet Labour hoping to gain it this time round. It's part of this shift, Andrew, where Labour's sort of started to sweep up more and more in the cities, but lose ground in some of the towns, particularly in northern and midland areas. If Keir Starmer is to ever get near number 10, he needs to show, potentially just 2 years from a general election this May, that he is making progress.
So we've talked quite a lot in the last few weeks about the possible peril that Boris Johnson is in, with Partygate still bubbling away out there, people still thinking about that and these elections, and that is clearly so. But it's also not without risk for Keir Starmer. Sir Ed Davey, who was in the studio yesterday, was talking about what he calls the blue wall, which are those Tory seats in the south that he thinks the Lib Dems can take. So all the party leaders will be observing this, I guess, with a certain amount of nervousness.
Yes, and that was why Partygate potentially so damaging for Boris Johnson, not just because the sort of former Labour Red Wall voters were up in arms about it, polls show they were, but so too were a lot of sort of more traditional Tories in seats like, in the Surrey seats like Dominic Raab's session. Those are the sorts of seats that Lib Dems are hoping to make ground in, and that's why Boris Johnson's effectively got to fend off that attack from both sides. It is worth saying that a lot of the seats that are up for grabs, Andrew, are already held by Labour or opposition.
So it's really, really hard for people like us observing to say exactly what success or failure is going to be. There'll be a lot of debate about that. But I'm going to turn now to somebody who knows all about fighting Labour up and down the country in local elections, has done it for a very, very long time. The former Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Secretary for Margaret Thatcher, at a particularly dangerous moment in the Cold War, Lord Michael Heseltine, joins me now. Lord Heseltine, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I can't see you, but I hope I can hear you.
I can certainly hear you, and nice to talk to you again.
Very, very nice to be talking to you again, Lord Heseltine. Can I start off by picking up on what I was saying about the Cold War? We all remember you very clearly in your flak jacket at the time of the SS-20 missiles coming from Russia, aiming at us. A period of real peril, it seemed at the time, when you were bringing in missiles to the UK. It was very controversial, but it felt like it was a moment in the Cold War when things could have gone badly wrong. Thinking back to that time and to the Cold War more generally, and to where we are now, with Vladimir Putin clearly losing on the battlefield in Ukraine, at least in the short term, how dangerous is this moment?
I think that what nuclear deterrence has done is to inject an absolute certainty that there are no winners. And we know that, the Russians know that. And so the caution which is being displayed is very sensible, and I am pretty sure would be equally embedded into the Russian approach as well. Because nobody will win. There is no victory in nuclear conflict.
And yet, for Vladimir Putin, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment is something of a national humiliation.
It certainly is looking very bad as far as I understand, reading, watching news reports. And of course that is very dangerous because, you know, the corner dog bites, and Putin is not likely to go without trying every last device. But what is impossible to know is what's happening around him, because I can't believe that the information available to us about Ukraine is not available to very serious numbers of people at the top of the Russian machine. So I doubt if Putin is quite as all-powerful as he is portrayed. In the end, there's always somebody waiting and watching. Now, what that means